Hi, I'm Dave. This is Brent. We're going to talk about a little password management today. So how you're dealing with password security, all the hurdles and ups and downs of dealing with passwords, which are difficult at best. Yeah. So what are some of your thoughts on password management? What can people be doing from even just from an individual basis, right?
Yeah, well, I guess let's start with how do we see passwords being managed out there today, and then maybe we can talk about some of the pros and cons about with what we're seeing today. So, a current thing that we're seeing or that we walk into when we do some consulting or we do some seminars, we'll see a very common approach as, all right, I have all these accounts I need to manage, I have all these passwords I need to remember, so an easy way for me to do that is use the same password in 80% of all the different sites that I I'm a part of. So I'll have this one that I remember, and I'll have maybe two that's a little bit of a variation of it's kind of easy, and then whenever I go anywhere, I just try one of those two, and typically that'll get me in. So that's one way.
Yeah.
Thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, we certainly see a lot of the password stuff, and people do different things. But I don't know. The problem with passwords are they are the kind of the last line of defense, and sometimes the only line of defense as it relates to getting into systems and data and information that needs to be pretty well protected. So on the organizational side, there's a lot of things that can be done. You integrate with Active Directory or do some single sign-on and do some things that make it easier for end users. From a individual basis, a lot of times it comes down to, like you said, I got to write down the passwords. I'm going to have the same password. If I have the same password for everything, and then one account gets hacked, now that hacker has my passwords across not just my Facebook, but my banking account too.
Oh, that's my
favorite.
favorite.
Kind of a problem, right?
You have the same password on your fantasy football league that you do on your bank account. So fantasy football gets exploited because that's the number one attack.
Yeah.
Because it's easy, because I can easily do a phishing attack and get that password because it's a malware site. And now I'm into your bank account, or I'm into your corporate network, or I'm into whatever I want because the lowest common denominator. Yeah, that's one of my favorites.
Right. Yeah, or even if you think about passwords for email, that should be one of the most secure ones because that's how other passwords are getting reset, right? So making sure your email password is really secure. Some of the things I did, I created this system of passwords, and I've grouped them into categories of kind of low security, don't really care if anybody get into it, have at it, all the way up to that's my banking and financial transactions, and the password's really long and really complex. But as I started to do that, I then ended up adopting LastPass, and there's other things out there, right? You can do Dashlane, or RoboForm was one of the first original kind of ones that was out there a number of years ago. But I use LastPass. I love it. It's great from a standpoint of I can have different passwords for everything I'm using. I can make the passwords really complex. And part of what I like about it is, even from a security standpoint, I have one really strong password I use to access all of my other passwords, but I also use a multi-factor authentication with them, that's all part of their free version. So when I log into my PC every 30 days, it prompts me to say, hey, okay, you're going to have to do a multi-factor authentication. So I get an alert on my phone, and I approve it and say, yep, that's me logging in there.
So it sounds like you're not using either Post-it notes or Excel spreadsheets to manage these passwords.
No. My
Is
sister
not a
was
good technique?
No, my sister was really proud one time. She had them all in Excel, and she moved it to OneNote. And she was really proud because she thought that was a lot more secure. But the reality of it is now you can just search for it easier in OneNote because it's really searchable. And you find things like passwords pretty rampant through her OneNote notebook. But
the reality of it is that's pretty common. So we joke about it a little bit, but storing passwords, because you have to remember so many, and the approach of using the same password is one way to do it, which is very easy to get in because, like I say, the lowest common denominator is the vulnerability. Another way is store this in a non-secure place, like writing it down on a Post-it note. We found so many under keyboards of passwords for computers. It's an easy place to find it. Excel spreadsheets, OneNote documents, those are all non-secure documents or unencrypted documents. So when somebody wants to get into your machine, or you leave it open, or you're on public Wi-Fi and they get in, that's a very easy place to get all those passwords. So you touched on password managers. You use LastPass. I like Dashlane. There's a ton of them out there that are great. We even wrote an article on allcom.com/blog about them. But what's the trick to getting a password manager? How do I do this?
Well, I think you pick one, right? So that's kind of the first step, is which one's right for you. I like the LastPass because there's something about paying like $1 a month for something that's like, it's so cheap and it's so easy, but you feel like, okay, but if I can get the free version, get away with it, you feel like you're saving all this money, but you're saving like $1, right? Who cares? But I do the free version of LastPass, and the multi-factor is included as part of that, and I can sync between multiple devices. So I've got it set up so I'm doing a lot of financial management and stuff for my mom and taking care of her bills and things like that. So I have to have all of her passwords in there and organized. I've got my wife has all of her passwords and access in there. We have our shared ones in there, and then I have mine. And so it's easy for me to go on the home computer and access it, on my work laptop, from a mobile device, wherever I may be, to be able to get at that information. I like being able to kind of sync it across that. So if I know my wife changes a password on some account that we both access sometimes, I'll get it too, because we're using the same, LastPass kind of solution. So that works pretty well for me. But
yeah, I'm sold password managers, but let's dig in a little bit to the why here behind why password managers even became a thing in the first place. Of course, it's the number of accounts that everybody has to manage is absurd nowadays, so you need to be able to manage passwords somehow. But the reality of it is that getting into a corporation, or getting into even a personal machine, or getting into a laptop or into a phone, that one of the most common ways that attackers do that is just passwords. It's usually an easy password, a crackable password, or it's a password that's very, very common out there as one that's been broken a number of times. So there's these sites out there that collect all the passwords that have been stolen over all these years, and they put them in one location so that these hackers can just take it as a library and say, all right, we'll try these 3 million passwords that are common and get into a company. So the number one hacking method by everyone out there is just weak and lost credentials. So that's why we take it pretty seriously. It's the easiest thing you can do by putting a password manager in place to avoid the most common problem. So you get a ton of value for, and I do pay the $1 a month for Dashlane because I do like the syncing, but it's well worth the effort to get a password manager to protect those passwords, to make them secure. They're very, very easy to use, and again, they curb like 80% of the attacks that are going on out there. So it's well worth it.
Yeah, we just had a new client that we were helping with a compromised system, right? And the system wasn't compromised for their data. It was compromised to use their server in order to scam all these other people around the country, and they wanted to obscure where they were coming from. So, and the way they got in, simple password, right? It was some really low-level simple password. They probably got some kind of malware along the way that allowed that password and that user ID to be accessed, and then they just used that server to be able to go out, and they had a whole list of Gmail accounts that they had hacked. So they were sending email from these different Gmail accounts to be able to, hey, I'm traveling in Australia and I've lost all my money, send me $1,000 please, kind of thing. So it was really interesting seeing the back end of that hacker and the access they had, how that was set up, and it was all just done through weak passwords.
So, simple fix, good password manager. Thanks.